Hey, so let me tell you, my team always gives me a hard time about my sermon lengths, but apparently I'm doing second announcements right now. This doesn't count for the total length. Just make that clear up front, all right? So if you're a teacher or you're in need of school supplies, we've been gathering school supplies for the last month, and after service, you can stop by the gym out there, and we've got school supplies for you. So please stop on by. We would love to gift you with some of that as you're heading back this year. Second of all, you got to meet some of our interns this summer. We had 7 interns who hung out with us, and unfortunately, this is the last week for some of them. They're all getting prepped and ready to head to school, except some of the slackers decided to take vacations through the summer, so they'll be hanging out with me for another week or two. I think 2 of the slackers are sitting right over there. If you're one of our Fusion interns, why don't you just stand up real quick? Stand up. Oh, there they are. There they are. Give them a round of applause. They worked hard this summer. They learned lots, and the kingdom's growing because of them. We wish them the best of luck as they head into this new journey in their life. All right, so now you can start the timer. Click. So have you ever made a heart decision that your head has had to catch up with? Danny, you ever made a heart decision that your head? Yeah. I'm sure we've all been there. We've said yes to a commitment in the heat of the moment, and then we're laying in bed that night overthinking, thinking, what did I say yes to? Why did I do that, right? Just a few weeks ago was my wife's 36th birthday. You'd never be able to tell. She looks like she's 25. And for her 36th, we decided to go out mattress shopping, because apparently that's what you do when you're my age. I don't know. So we're out mattress shopping. And listen, we have been thinking about getting a new mattress for some time here. You know, it wasn't like an impromptu decision, but my wife reminded me before we went into the shop, she said, hey, we're just here to look. We're here to check prices. We're here to try some stuff out, kind of figure out what we want. And, you know, I always think through things. So, of course, I made an offer on the first mattress we tried out. Now, thankfully, my wife, she loves the mattress, and it's comfortable. So that's the good news. The bad news is my head had to catch up with my heart when it came to this mattress. You know, I mean, like, I made the decision, and then my bank account felt it. I mean, if you've ever been mattress shopping, it's not cheap, you know? And as a result, my head had to catch up with that heart decision. Of course, the inverse can be true as well. Sometimes we make these, what we consider to be rational, thought-through decisions with our head, and our heart has to catch up, right? I remember years ago when I was a youth minister, I went to Arizona on a missions trip, and I'm standing at the bottom of this cliff looking up, and I'm saying, oh, yeah, this is totally doable. I can climb. This is no problem. I get halfway up and look down, and my heart's like, why? My heart had to catch up to my head that time. And as I'm getting older, I find myself making both heart and head decisions that my body has to catch up with. You know what I mean, right? When I was in high school, I was standing on the table, and I decided to do a belly flop. Now, inertia being what it is, my body stopped, my head continued. I hit my chin on the table, split open. I'm bleeding everywhere. I actually still have a scar there today. Why would I do something like this? I'm going to blame it on hormones. There was a girl I was trying to impress, and you know, girls like nothing better than guys that make stupid choices. So my body had to catch up with the decision that my heart made at that moment. Now, you could ask any scientist, and they're going to tell you our bodies are a very complex system of chemicals and organs. Those are the technical terms right there. It's a mishmash of different things. You ask a psychologist, sociologist, they're going to tell you we've got all kinds of things running through our brains, but we're one unit, right? Yeah, I can stand up here and I can say head and heart and divide the two, and you know what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm talking about. Because we have these warring systems inside of us, and sometimes they just seem to disagree, and we're like, how can both of these things be inside of us, right? Now, this idea of trying to sum up these different parts of what it means to be human, this isn't new. It's been happening for all of creation. In fact, the ancient Israelites, the people that we read about in the first half of the Bible, they had some words that they used when describing their bodies and everything that were in it. And we're going to read some of those from Deuteronomy chapter 6. Now, the book of Deuteronomy, it was the last words of Moses, this incredible leader who led Israel through this time of transition. And he's kind of summing up everything that he wants to tell them before he passes away. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, he gives this command that becomes so central to the Israelite people that they actually give it a name. They call it the Shema. The Shema. And the Shema was so important to the Israelites that they would memorize it. They would recite it in the morning when they woke up. They would say it before they went to bed at night. The really devout ones would actually write it on a little piece of paper and place it in a box and wear it around their foreheads. It was called a phylactery, so that that word was always on their minds. And so the Shema, it gets its name from the first word in this command, hear, hear. And here it is. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your strength. All of your heart, your soul, and your strength. See how Moses divides up the human being here? Heart, soul, and strength. Love God with these things. Now, I'm pretty sure that when I say these words, you have a particular image pop to mind about what they mean, right? Like, when I say heart, what does that make you think of? Probably not just the organ inside of you, but like when we talk about heart decisions, what does that mean? Yeah, our feelings, our emotions, right? But for the Israelites, this word, oh, there they are, heart, soul, and strength. We're going to meet these guys a lot today. Heart means lev. Lev. Well, that's the Hebrew word, and it means the conscience, the will, affection. For the Israelites, they didn't divide this idea of emotions and decisions. So when we talk about heart in the Israelite context, they were talking about both the heart and the head combined together. How about soul? What do we think of when we think of soul? That one's a bit more difficult to define, right? I think everybody imagines like, this little wispy thing that leaves our body once our body dies, something like that. Now, the Hebrew word for soul was nephesh. Nephesh. And the actual definition here would be something like a living, breathing, physical being. Living, breathing, physical being. In fact, if you back up and you go into Genesis chapter 2, it says that God shaped the first human being and then he breathed into them. And Adam became nephesh. Nephesh. See, we separate the body and the spirit in our culture. We think of these as two different things sometimes, but for the early Israelites, these two ideas were combined. To be nephesh meant you had both a physical body and a soul or spirit inside of you. And the last word, strength, well, you're probably thinking of me right now, Yeah, I'm definitely the image that comes to mind here. But strength is the word me'ad. And me'ad, if we actually transliterate it, like if we said it in its most accurate form, it would be very or much. Very or much, which is kind of an odd idea here. Moses is saying, you are to love God with your muchness. Your muchness. And this spoke to physical strength, but it also had to do with your wealth and power and abilities. All the things that make you beyond your physical body and those heart decisions that you're making. Now, as I said, we get a slightly different image when it comes to these words. We understand them in a separate way. But what we see here is that Moses is commanding the Israelites to love God with their everything, right? To love God with their conscience and their will and their affection and their decisions. To love God with their strength and their wealth and their abilities. To love God with their everything. Everything. Now, the Shema is probably familiar to many of you, because it's some words that Jesus speaks inside the New Testament. We tend to call it the greatest command, though. And if you get into the New Testament, the first 4 books we call the Gospels. And the first 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are called synoptic Gospels because they have a lot of repeated information. They're very similar to each other. And in those 3 Gospels, Jesus speaks these very words. Now, in the Gospel of Matthew, it looks just like what we heard here in Deuteronomy chapter 6. But Mark and Luke, Jesus tweaks the Shema a little bit. So we're going to fast forward 2,000 years to the time of Jesus, and we're going to see what he had to say. Now, just to set this up, Jesus he's in his final week of life at this point, and he has stirred up the hornet's nest. The religious leaders of Jerusalem, they want to get rid of him. They want him done, finished, dead. And so they've come up with this plot. And they decide to go to him and ask him difficult questions, hoping to catch him in some sort of heresy. And then they'll arrest him, and then they can enact their evil plot against him. And so Jesus has answered 2 of these questions so far, and now we find ourselves on the 3rd one. And here it is, from Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 34. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? Now, this is a big question, because you got to understand, 613 commands inside the Old Testament. And then over the course of the years, the Israelites had added to those commands through their oral tradition, thousands upon thousands of things, okay? So people devoted their lives to understanding all these laws and how they intricately work together. And this teacher asked, which of these, of all of these, is the most important? Lots of choices here. And what do you think Jesus responds with? The Shema, right? The very thing, the very verse, the very passage that every Israelite knew, but he changes a little bit. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul, with all of your mind and with all of your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Well said, teacher, the man replied. You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all of your heart, with all of your understanding, and with all of your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all of the burnt offerings, all of the sacrifices. When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, You're not far from the kingdom of God. And from then on, no one dared to ask him any questions. So Jesus adds to this, right? What does he add? So we had heart, soul, and strength in the Shema. What does he add to the list here? The mind. Okay, so he adds the 4th one, the mind. And then he goes on and he says, hey, and not only that, you should love your neighbor as yourself, right? He says these two are the most important. Out of everything else that you're going to read in the Old Testament, this is it. This is what you need to grasp. You're supposed to love God with these things. Now remember, the Jewish people, they knew the Shema by heart. Why would Jesus decide to add some words to something that every Israelite within hearing distance knew? Why would he do that? And I think the easy answer is a lot has changed in 2,000 years, right? Since Moses originally penned these words, a lot has changed. The more complex answer is that these words would soon be heard by a Greek audience, a Greek world. In fact, even at this time, the Jewish world had been heavily shaped by Greek culture. 200 years before, Alexander the Great had rolled through and conquered everything, and with him he brought Hellenism. Hellenism? Am I saying that right? Okay, Linwood's affirming. So, Hellenism, which means that Greek culture was spreading even into the Jewish world. And for the Greeks, they didn't have words that translated, you remember those difficult words like nephesh and meod? They didn't have words that really fit those categories. And so what Jesus does here is he breaks that word meod, which originally the Israelites understood as muchness. He broke that into 2 different ideas, your mind and your strength. And this was important because for Greek culture, mind was a big deal. They were about the rational, the intellectual, the processing. They thought these things were very important. In Greek culture, mind was elevated. So when Jesus says, love God with these things, he's helping us understand as a Greek audience what that actually means. Now, this makes sense to us because we too have been shaped heavily by Greek culture and Greek philosophy. All right? I said at the beginning, the illustration I used, talking about head and heart. We get that. That comes from Greek philosophy. So now we've got these 4 different categories. But here's the deal. You can plug whatever you want in here, anything that you think makes up what it means to be a human being, and it comes out to the same results. Love God with your everything, right? Love God with your everything. We find that both in the Shema, and we find it here in what Jesus says in the greatest command. But here's the problem. As human beings, we're not great at this. We have a habit of approaching God with part of ourselves. You know, some of us are mind people, some of us are heart people, some of us are soul and spirit people or body people. But rarely do we love him with all of those things at once. And honestly, we see this in church culture. If you look at all the different divisions in the church, a lot of them revolve around which of these things you're supposed to love God with the most. If you come from a Pentecostal or charismatic background, you probably learn to love God with your heart and with your soul, right? The experience, worship, relationship with God, these are the important things in Pentecostal culture, and they're worth celebrating. If you come from a Baptist or a Restoration background, then you probably learn to love God with your mind, because that group is all about doctrine and teaching and getting into God's word and study. And there's something to be celebrated there, right? If you're from a high church background, Catholic or Anglican, these traditions talk about loving God with your strength. It's about ritual. It's about the good works that you do. And there's something to be celebrated there, right? If we're honest, we're all shaped by where we've come from, either good or bad. So you probably have a tendency to love God with one or more area of your lives, and you hold back in some of the others. But Jesus didn't say, pick and choose, right? He said, love God with all of these things. Heart, soul, mind, strength. Love God with your everything. Now, just to put this another way, I love my wife. I love my wife, right? We've been married now for 10 years, and I love her. Now, what would happen if I loved my wife with my heart, but not with my mind? Right? She'd get the emotional side of me, but my mind, it'd always be wandering to other women, right? What if I loved my wife with my body, but not with my heart? I'd just be using her, right? So when I love my wife, I'm supposed to love her in all these ways, and God desires the same from us. He wants us to love him with everything that we are. We're going to call this today all in obedience. All in obedience. Not just being obedient with a part of us, but all in obedience. But seriously, in a world of so many choices, why should we give God our all in obedience? Now, some of you are out there probably saying, oh, there's a really obvious answer to this. God created us, right? He made us. He's in control of this world, so obviously he deserves our all in obedience. And yeah, that is true, but I still see a world at war with its creator. And I'm not just talking about outside these walls. Let's be honest. As Christ followers, I've seen plenty of people acknowledge God with their lips and walk out and do exactly what they want to do with their lives. We aren't great at this all-in obedience thing. So let's talk about why all-in obedience is a necessity. And to do that, we've got to redefine two terms that you've probably heard a ton in the church: the word gospel and the word faith. Now, if you've been around a while, stick with me. I know sometimes when I'm hearing the basics, I check out because I'm like, oh, I already got this. But there is something to be learned here, so stick with me. So let's talk about the first of these words, gospel. And what does gospel mean? Well, the good news, okay? The gospel is the good news. And specifically, we're speaking about the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, right? And if I asked you to share with me the good news of Jesus Christ, it would be something like this. Jesus pre-existed with the Father. That means he was before all creation. Jesus took on human flesh, fulfilling Old Testament promises, right? The promises that we find to Abraham, that he will be a blessing to all nations. The promises that we find to David, that he would have a son to rule on the throne forever. He takes on flesh, becomes an infant. He grows and lives just like us. And then we find that Jesus, the Son of God, died for our sins. In accordance with Scripture, he dies on a cross. When we continue this idea, Jesus was buried, right? And this is important. This is important because Jesus didn't just faint on the cross. He wasn't playing dead. He died. He was gone. He was put into a tomb, and for 3 days he was in that tomb. But Jesus was raised on the third day in accordance with Scripture. And we don't have to just take his word for it. Over the course of the next 40 days, he appeared to over 500 witnesses before he ascended back to his Father in heaven. And this is good news, right? This is great news. This is the gospel message, but this is only part of the gospel message. This is only part of the gospel message. And the reality is a lot of us stop here. We don't take it to the next step. And unfortunately, when we do that, what we end up doing is focusing on what Jesus brings to us. We make ourselves the center of the story, but this isn't a story about us, guys. We're side characters at best. We were invited into it, but we're not the main character. This is a story about Jesus Christ. And so if we follow the biblical narrative and continue looking at what the gospel actually is, here's what we find. Jesus is seated at the right hand of God as Lord and King over all things. All right? Not someday. Right now, Jesus is seated at the right hand of God as King. He was given a crown. We use the words glorified when we talk about that. He was glorified by God. Philippians 2 is just a phenomenal piece of scripture that talks on this subject. It talks about how Jesus died but was then raised, and as a result, God elevated him and elevated his name above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. Jesus is King. And not only that, Jesus will return to this earth as the conquering King and the perfect judge. This is the full gospel message, guys. This is the story about Jesus. And why is it important when we're presenting the gospel to people? Why is it important that we include these last two items? Why is this important? Well, first of all, this keeps Jesus at the center of the story, right? This is the story about Jesus, as I already said. This keeps Jesus at the story. Yeah, we are included in it. We get invited to be a part of it, and we become children of God as a result, which is spectacular. But Jesus is the center of the story. To quote Matthew Bates, Bible scholar, he says, in reading Paul's summary of the gospel, we quickly recognize that the gospel is not at its most basic level a tale about me and my quest for salvation, or even us and our quest, but rather it is a grand cosmic story about God's Son and what he has done. This is a story about Jesus. But the second part of this is because Jesus is King right now, he's returning to this earth and he's going to defeat evil for all time. Because of that, if we truly believe that, then he deserves our all in obedience. He deserves our all in obedience. Now, listen, we're from this democratic republic society. We don't really jive with the idea of king. I think our ancestors rebelled against the king or something, right? You know, so king is not a comfortable idea for us. And we really tend to emphasize, maybe even overvalue, personal freedom, and we tend to mow down anything that is in the way of that personal freedom. We don't like this idea of king, and when we think of king, we think of tyranny, we think of someone who abuses their power. But here's the reality. Jesus is king. Okay, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether you choose to give your obedience to him or not, Jesus is king. That doesn't change that reality. But the good news is that Jesus is a good king. A great king. He's the kind of king that sacrifices for his people, that lives for his people, that serves his people, his followers, and he is worth being obedient to. So this is the good news. This is the big picture of the good news. But how do we access the promise of forgiveness that comes through the life, death, resurrection, and enthronement of Jesus Christ? Like, what do we do? And I think the word that might come to your mind is faith, right? We have to have faith. Now, just a month ago, Joe talked about this idea of faith as it's found in the Bible. So if you want to know more about this, you can back up. I am gonna just touch on this real quick because this is important. Because like I said, we have to kind of redefine faith in its fullness if we're going to understand why obedience is necessary. So this Greek word faith is pistis. And we would typically translate it as to believe, right? We must believe in Jesus Christ and what he has done. But I'm reading this book right now called Allegiance or Salvation by Allegiance Alone. And the author says, hey, this is really a shallow understanding of faith. If we look back at the biblical text, if we understand the Greek as it was meant to be interpreted, maybe a better understanding or a better definition of what we mean by pistis would be allegiance or loyalty. Now, allegiance is a word that we use a whole lot, except when we're talking about like the Pledge of Allegiance, right? But allegiance means a commitment to that thing that we have pledged our allegiance to. Okay, so we're making a vow to follow something. We're making a vow to protect it, to keep it. So that's what allegiance is. So it should come as no surprise when we look at the Old Testament and we look at the word that's most often compared to faith inside the New Testament. When it's translated, it's actually not most often translated as belief. It's translated as loyalty. Loyalty. And loyalty is a lot deeper than just believing, right? Sure, you must believe that he exists, right? You've got to believe. But loyalty comes with obedience. It's a loyalty to Jesus, an allegiance to Jesus intellectually, emotionally, physically, right? Faith is action and belief working hand in hand, and you cannot separate the two. And we have this tendency to separate the two. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved. That's from the Bible, right? And I believe that. I believe that verse, but I also look through the Bible, and what I see over and over again is that belief isn't enough. Faith is belief and action hand in hand. And you might be thinking, man, Josh, that sounds a lot like work salvation. We don't have to earn our salvation. And you're right. In fact, we can't. There is no list of laws that we can follow that will earn us the right relationship with God. Can't happen. Jesus did what needed to be done on the cross perfectly. We can't add to that. Can't do it. But what I see in Scripture over and over again is that belief isn't enough. Seriously, read Hebrews chapter 11. This is the great faith chapter. It lists off these faith heroes. And over again, it says, hey, this person had faith, right? But it doesn't just say Abraham believed, Moses believed, Joshua believed. It says Abraham did this. See, it links together the obedient action of Abraham with the belief that he had. Later on, if you want to, you can actually check out what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13. He talks about love. You know this chapter, right? This is a great chapter. It talks all about love. We get to the end of the chapter, and you know what he says? He says, now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. Do you know which one he says is the greatest? Love. And love is an action here, okay? Love is an action. Or you could read James chapter 2. In James chapter 2, James, the brother of Jesus, is writing, and he said, hey, faith without works is not faith at all. In fact, his last words in the chapter are, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. Another really interesting line here in this particular passage is he says, hey, you believe? Great. Even the demons believe, and they shudder at the thought. See, the demons know who Jesus is. The demons know who God is, but they aren't living in obedience to him. Their actions don't line up with that belief. Or you could just take Jesus' words themselves. Over and over again, what we find in Scripture is that he calls us to obedience. He calls us to take up our cross and follow him, right? Take up our cross and follow him. Or he tells interesting parables like the sheep and the goats. He's talking about his return at this point, and he says, when I return, I'm going to separate the people to two groups. The ironic thing is both of these groups believe. Both of these groups believe. But to one group, he says, hey, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was naked and alone, you clothed me, you comforted me. And they're like, when did we do that, Jesus? He says, anytime you loved the least of these, you did that for me. Then he turns to the other group who believes who he is, and he says, you didn't feed me. You didn't clothe me. You didn't give me a drink. See, Jesus, on his return, isn't just looking at what you believe. He's looking at your faith, your loyalty, your allegiance to him. So yes, there is no right relationship with God apart from what Jesus has done on the cross. Can't get there. But our understanding of faith has to expand. It has to expand beyond belief to loyalty and action, allegiance. So here again, we discover a call to all in obedience, right? The gospel demands our obedience because Jesus is king. Faith demands our obedience because belief and action cannot be separated. They're one and the same. Both the gospel and faith call us to something more than just intellectual belief. They call us to more than something than heartfelt worship or even more than good works. They call us to all in obedience. All of these things coalescing in a love for Jesus Christ, our whole being. So let's tie all these ideas together. Jesus, the Son of God, came, he lived, he died, he rose again, but the gospel doesn't end there, right? He was enthroned and he is returning to this earth. If we authentically believe that, then we place our faith, or better understood, our allegiance, we give our allegiance to him. Both the gospel and our loyalty to Jesus demand all in obedience. And so we will attempt to live lives that honor him. We attempt to become more like him in this life. And he sums this up in Mark chapter 12, the greatest commandment, right? Obedience is loving God with all that we are, soul, mind, strength, body, everything, right? So here's what we're going to do with all of this. All right, I've got a couple of challenges for you. I hope you understand at this point that all in obedience is the path forward from here, right? You know, it's where belief and obedience collide. That's when we have faith. So my first challenge to you is this. If you hear the gospel message of Jesus, if you hear that he is the Son of God, that he lived, that he died, that he rose again, if you hear that, and you're ready to recognize it as true, then I want to challenge you to give your allegiance to him. I want to challenge you to step up and do that today. Now, I'm not just talking to the Christ followers in the room. As I mentioned earlier, as Christians, I've seen plenty of people who claim the name of Christ who go on and they go on living the way that they want. So whether this is your first time hearing the gospel or it's your 1,000th time hearing the gospel, if you recognize that your life is not being lived in all in obedience to Jesus Christ, that you haven't actually chosen allegiance to him, I want to challenge you to step up and do that today. In just a couple of minutes, I'm going to invite some of my prayer team up here. I'm going to be up here. If you're ready to do that, if you're ready to have a conversation about what that looks like, we want to help you discover your next step. We want to do that. Now, my second challenge is this: to consider what all in obedience looks like in your life. Jesus told us that obedience is found by loving God with what? Right. Heart, soul, strength, mind are everything, right? The reality is that, as I mentioned, each of us has a tendency to hold back on some of those. We find it easy to love God in some ways, difficult to love God in others. So, for instance, in my life, I find it very easy to love God with my mind. I love studying. I love getting to God's word. I love having theological conversations, deep debate about truths. I love that stuff. But it's more difficult for me to love God with my heart. Worship has always been challenging to me. The emotional side of loving Jesus. So which one's lacking for you? Where are you holding back? The challenge here is to recognize it, to claim it, and to practice obedience in that area of your life. And this is going to require some serious reflection on your part, figuring out what that looks like, because I can't really tell you, okay, what it means for you to love God entirely with your soul, with your spirit. I can't tell you entirely what it means for you to look like, to be obedient with your body. I can't do that, but I want you to start praying through this and considering it. And because of that, I have some reflection questions for you. Now, these are on the back of your bulletin insert, so don't worry, you're not going to have to write all this stuff down. But when it comes to the heart, here are some questions for you. What desire is drawing you away from authentic obedience to Jesus Christ? What desires are drawing you away? Those are probably some idols in your life. You need to get rid of it. Full-on allegiance, full-on obedience to Jesus Christ instead. What would it look like for you to have a pure heart, which is what the Spirit does for us, right? What would it look like to have a pure heart? Challenge with your soul. Now, when I'm talking about soul here, I'm talking about our spirit. How well are we doing following the Spirit of God in our life? What would it look like for you to keep in step with the Spirit of God, to start paying attention to His voice in your life? What quality do you need to allow the Spirit to grow in your life? Remember, we've got this whole list: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, right? Fruit of the Spirit. That's what He does. He brings those products out. Which one do you need to allow God, that Spirit of God, to grow in your life? When it comes to the mind, in what ways does the Spirit of God need to renew your mind? In Romans 12, it talks about how we'll be transformed because the Spirit's going to transform how we think. He renews our mind. What are you holding on to from your past life, right? What ways of thinking don't align with the kingdom of God? It's time to allow the Spirit of God to do some renewal there. How can you set your mind on things above rather than on earthly things? And with our body, our strength, how can you begin to represent Jesus by serving others? How can you begin to offer your whole body to do His work in this world? How do you live out love at home, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your gym, and the area where you go to hang out with people? Wherever, how can you represent God by how you love people? See, remember, guys, all in obedience, it starts with allegiance to Jesus, the God King. That's where it starts. And every day after is an opportunity to show our loyalty by aligning our lives to His will, His desire, His kingdom. So, fight the good fight, brothers and sisters. Move beyond belief and into action. Here is my prayer for you today: that you recognize Jesus for who He is: Creator, Redeemer, King. That you choose to hear this good news and respond to it and give Him your faith, your allegiance, your loyalty, your everything. And that you choose to embrace the all-in obedience that a life with Jesus requires. Let's pray. Father, You're good even when we fall short. Many of us in here have chosen to give our allegiance to Your Son, Father. We recognize Him as King. But I ask that You open our eyes to the fact that believing is not good enough, Father. We need to be living as if He is King of our lives. We need to be living in obedience. And so I ask that You reveal to us where we are falling short, Father. Help us to follow with everything that we are. All in. I pray for those who have not recognized Jesus as King, as Savior, as Lord yet. I ask that Your Spirit works in their lives, transforms their hearts, and helps them to realize that they have a need for this, that they're walking a path that doesn't lead to hope. It doesn't lead to salvation. It doesn't lead to eternity. And I ask that they choose to place their faith in Your Son, Jesus Christ, that they choose belief, that they choose obedience, that they see Jesus as King. Your kingdom is growing here, Father. Help us not to limit it, but instead to be a part of that growth. Help us to look forward to Your return when Your kingdom will come in its fullness. It is in Your name we pray. So as you head out today, remember, please, don't leave today if you are ready to pledge your allegiance to Jesus Christ. Come up here, hang out. We'll talk about that next step. Let's worship together.